Hey guys, it's Jack. I just wanted to talk to you today about a way that you can help support the podcast if you're not already. To support the channel is to become a Patreon member. So we have Patreon memberships that start at just $5 a month. And when you sign up, you get access to all of our episodes ad free. That's the big bonus for that. I mean, we also do some Patreon bonus episodes for our subscribers. But this is the biggest and best way that you can support the Team House channel and podcast if you'd like to. And we really appreciate that. So go and check us out at patreon.com/the Team House.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Eyes On. I'm Andy Milburn.
Jason Lyons.
I'm Dimitri Kontakos.
And most importantly, we have as a guest Mick Mulroy, who is becoming a regular. And in case you haven't been fortunate enough to catch Mick before, he's a very important man in a lot of spheres, although he would be the last one to claim that title. Probably most notably, he's a former Marine. So we always have to have a high ratio of Marines on this. Marines versus Greeks. But also former senior CIA operative and operative. Sorry, I didn't pronounce that very well. DASD for the Middle East. That's a Assistant Secretary of Defense. And, which time I was fortunate enough to work with him. Very much below him, but with him. And then since then has run the Lobo Institute. And if you're interested in the Lobo Institute, and who could not be if you're interested in world events, if you care about things like war and prevention of war and child soldiering and, all the peripheral tragedy that comes along with geopolitics, then Mick and his team are your guys. And I'm a very junior member of the Lobo Institute. I'm still waiting for my T-shirt and my laminated card, but nevertheless, very proud to be a part of the organization. So enough intro, Mick, over to you. And, first and foremost, let's talk about the astounding news emerging this morning about Mossad outsourcing assassination attempts or successful assassination efforts.
That's right. Hey, great to be with you guys from Vuliagmeni, Greece, where I'm waiting for a flight into Israel, which apparently has been postponed due to Armageddon. I will get there. Next week, I think.
I love it when you see that flash up on the airline screen. Not technical difficulty, but delays according, due to Armageddon. I mean, it kind of kills any complaints, doesn't it?
It does. Some people go the other direction, and some people want to go. Who knows? But it's we're still working on our humanitarian missions. As a former covert Bubba, I gotta tip of the hat, at least when it comes to the ability of Israeli intelligence to do what they did. Right? There's some discussion. If you're talking about the attack in Tehran that killed Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader, I think most U.S. media outlets are reporting that it was a planted bomb, right? And now we've got IRGC saying that it was some kind of close proximity guided munition of some sort. So I don't know which one it was, but obviously to be able to get into your most senior adversary's country, and which is obviously very controlled, being top-down autocracy, and do something like this is pretty impressive. Now, I'm sure the United States would have wished they didn't do it because they would like to see a ceasefire negotiation succeed. And this individual, of course, was the main negotiator for Hamas. But from Israel's perspective, you got to look at both. He was one of two individuals that were primarily responsible for the attacks on October 7th.
Yeah, we're
innocent Israeli. So, but this is certainly a two-pronged event.
Yeah, Mick, I think you touched on something. I think it's a good point to come back to perhaps later in the conversation about strategically. This may not be in anyone's best interest, except for a political party in power and one man in power in Israel. Potentially, I am not saying that is the case, but strategically, that could be the case. But when we're talking about the kind of the skillful mechanics of this hit, and Mick, you know more than most people on this, but there's an opportunity. I mean, there's a cost once you execute, right? I mean, they had according to the Daily Telegraph this morning, who supposedly has half a dozen sources within the IRGC. This was prepared like 3 or 4 months ago. 3 bombs were placed in 3 separate rooms. The IRGC, the guys, the informants are saying that it was an inside job, in that Mossad hired agents from Ansar al-Mahdi, which is the protection unit that the IRGC uses for domestic protection of VIPs. So it really is kind of, and these guys are super screened for loyalty and everything else, as you can imagine. So it's an extraordinary, you almost sense that maybe, I mean, if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, you would come up with some thing where Netanyahu is in cohorts with the Iranian administration here, right? I mean, it's just bizarre. But anyway, they executed. Now they can't do it again. So question number 1, was this the right target? Whatever ramification, we probably can answer that now. But number 2, what's the immediate fallout? I mean, Ghani himself came out yesterday and said this was like a huge humiliation. The outside, what these informants are saying is that the IRGC's reflexive response was, oh, this was a missile, and they claim to see a projectile outside the pane of glass, whatever. But that was kind of an instant reflexive reaction to shit. This is really, really fucking embarrassing. How do we explain this? What are your thoughts about that? I know we can't verify any of that stuff right now. What are your kind of general thoughts about that, the latest news?
That's right, Andy. I can't verify it because I don't know. It's just what I read on the media, and people, like to reach out and tell me things. But I essentially think, if you look at it, this was done. It was an exceptional intelligence covert operation. No matter how you look at it, whether it was strategically smart or not, it was technically sound, and to be an ability to recruit somebody that close and that screened, as you point out, is impressive. And then get these certain explosive devices in place, which could be detonated, obviously remotely, once you realize that your target was there, right? And they must have had an idea that Hainia and people like him stayed in these. They said it was like a veterans type, almost like a BOQ or something like that. Something, but they put VIPs that were, associated probably with the proxy forces, right, in this area. And so they had to figure that out. They had to get it in there, and then they had to figure out when he was there, right? Because it doesn't do any good just to clack it off when the wrong people are in there. So, from a technical and tactical covert operations perspective, it was pretty phenomenal. Now, I know people are saying, well, they did it, with the intent to embarrass. Potentially, right? It was the presidential inauguration. He was invited as a guest of, the Supreme Leader. It does look like it was almost intended to just really just like stick it to him right in the eye. And maybe it was. It very well could be. I'm sure they could say, well, we only had the opportunity then because that's when he was there. But either way, I think, the United States came out, U.S. government, Secretary Blinken specifically, and said 2 things. We had nothing to do with it, which may or may not be the case. Obviously, the U.S. Intelligence Service, CIA, and Mossad works very closely together. But since I don't think we would want to see this happen, I doubt that we had anything to do with it. So I think that's probably a fair point. I don't know, but it's unusual that they would not have given us a heads up, and that is because, of course, we have a lot of military assets in Iraq, and Syria that are very vulnerable. And we would like to know when, our key partner countries do things that would significantly antagonize Iran, which would then potentially gin up its proxy forces and militias. And so I don't know if that's accurate. I wouldn't question Secretary Blinken's honesty, of course. So that appears to be the case. And we did not know, and we did not participate. But we are going to be dealing with the consequences, right? I mean, we can get into, they're sending, the USS Abraham Lincoln over there right now. They're sending another squadron of fighter aircraft. They already have the Wasp, amphibious group out there, multiple destroyers. It's just everything that I'm talking to folks in the Pentagon is they're sending everything they got because they expect that Iran will not only have to respond, but they will have to respond more significantly than they did even in April, April 13th, I think it was, because that was, it was a big show, had no effect.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to do something at least as substantial, but I think from their perspective, with way more of an impact, or it's just going to be viewed as like a fireworks show.
Yeah.
And of course, Hezbollah does too, not just because they essentially work for Iran, but Fawad Shukr just got killed in Beirut, right? So so it's a double whammy. I think we're going to see something potentially from multiple different directions to try to overwhelm their missile defense system, which is not going to be good, obviously, for Israel, but obviously the United States could be pulled into this thing.
Yeah.
So
on that note, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I'm just thinking, any idea on who steps up next to fill that vacuum after that assassination?
Jason, you're talking about for Hamas and Hezbollah?
Mm-hmm.
They always have. That's a good question because this does go to the point that some would make is every time you assassinate a leader, they get replaced. So, I'm all, I spent a lot of time, as you might imagine, chasing people down that did bad things in the United States. And I was always, proud of, whatever participation I had with, taking them out, the, battle space, so to speak. But, and I'd ask Andy, you could ask a lot of the guys in the last 20 years, they always get replaced. It's like, that's what they call it, mowing the grass, right? So at first it seems like it's going to have a huge impact. Okay, well, nobody can replace, Ismail Haniyeh. He's been around forever. He was at one time the commander, the head of Hamas in Gaza. You could say all these things. And Fawad Shukr went all the way back to the Beirut bombing.
Mm-hmm.
He was wanted for that. So I'm 100%, especially that guy, seeing him gone. But you do have to calculate that in with, okay, what's the strategic impacts? What is this going to do? It's not about that guy. That guy deserves to be gone a long time ago. But you have to calculate that in the fact that he will be replaced, right? I'd be replaced. Everybody would be replaced all the way up to, in our system, of the commander chief. So who's going to replace him? I would imagine that they would keep that somewhat hidden, so they don't just put a giant, bullseye on his head. But I would say that is something that's, we're going to be trying to find out, but they always replace them. So it is worth taking them out, but it's always important to realize that it's not going to change the trajectory of the group as much as we would like. And you have to deal with the consequences, which in this case, the ceasefire negotiations, at least for the near, maybe medium term, are complete.
Yeah, I always, with what you just said in mind, Mick, I always think of Zarqawi, AQIM.
Mm-hmm.
Al-Qaeda in Iraq killed more people after Zarqawi's death than before. And yet, you remember when we got the news of Zarqawi's death, I don't know about you, but we were all high-fiving, think, hey, they must come to an end, But no, it was nearer the beginning. I think we love the cult of personality. And so we think that removing personalities from the picture will affect the overall situation, but our enemies are more pragmatic. Perhaps the one exception I can think of is Nasrallah. I think if he disappeared, that would have a cataclysmic effect on Hezbollah. But it's going back to how clever it was, the fact that it has caused so much internal questioning and dissension. There's an internal blame game going on now in the IRGC. You've got a former Iranian intelligence minister coming out and saying, hey, I warned you guys this would happen. All the officials of the Islamic Republic should be worried about their lives. This is exactly what Israel wants, of course. for everyone to be looking over their shoulder and blaming each other.
Yes, the perfect covert operation, which of course has a clandestine side to it, so you don't know who did it, right? If it's obviously it's covert in the sense that they're not going to claim it, and they do it, under certain cover in tradecraft. But the perfect one is, and they obviously know this is Israel, is when they don't really know what happened, right? And that didn't happen in this case. But if you can do that and make them think it was an inside job, and without giving details, it was one specific mission I was involved with where the group came from the sea, right? This is a small thing, but it really helped, and it wasn't even the intent. Remember those shoes you used to wear, running shoes? Got real popular. They were actually like feet. They just kind of stuck around your feet, and everybody started running in them. And then dudes were falling out because like it destroys your feet and stuff. But anyway, they got real popular. So the people that came, the group that was involved in this came in, and when they all had those things on. So when they took off their gear, they were running around in those things, vice boots. Again, not intending to try to be sneaky, but the side effect was when they left, the group that we were going against, who had guys leave and get killed and all this stuff, they thought it was an inside job because they're like, this isn't Americans. They're barefoot. No, Americans don't run around barefoot on the beach and up into because they could see right. And it was really, it really caused consternation where they started killing each other and saying it couldn't have been the Americans. I mean, they always, they have all the gear. They're not going to do this stuff. So I know it's kind of a funny story, but the point being is anything you could do in a covert operation so that you don't want to take credit, right? You don't go into that business to be able to take credit and pound your chest. Anything you can do as a country that's trying to carry out these things where it really confuses them, whether it's an inside job and all that, is better, way better. That's the best way to do it.
A really interesting point too, which is, a very insidious thought for the Iranians is that in order for this protection unit, the Ansar al-Mahdi protection unit, to have been infiltrated, must have involved someone higher in the organization. And, there's a quote in the Daily Telegraph today, again, from an anonymous senior Iranian official. And he says, it's still a question for everyone how it happened. I can't make sense of it. There must be something higher. Right. So leaving, does he need someone higher involved or something? But it would seem to me that seems, I realize we're speculating, but it is extraordinary because if you look back, I was looking up on this protection unit, and their mandate is laid down by the Supreme Council of National Security. And the Supreme Council of National Security essentially does a mission analysis on every mission, determines the number of designated bodyguards, where they should be, blah, 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 for each official. So again, you wonder if there's so much attention from higher up on security of VIPs, and yet the organization being infiltrated. I think that's an interesting point. Number two, what happened to these guys after they planted the explosives? Well, the reports are from the Iranians that they escaped the country. Well, how did they do that? It's extraordinary, but it's an interesting point. And Mick, you've dealt with this many times, is what are your obligations to your sources, right? In the past, when Mossad has recruited locals, they have been less than protective in the aftermath, and there's been some internal criticism about that. Hey, as an intelligence organization, we have to value our sources and our accomplices. So this may be a sign that they've evolved. They haven't, in order to secure this kind of cooperation going ahead, they have to establish a reputation of looking after their sources. Mick, is with all your background in intelligence, any thoughts about that? I mean, anything unusual, or am I off the mark?
Well, you're definitely not off the mark, Andy. When it comes to intelligence organizations, at least the good ones, your protection of sources is absolutely pinnacle to the success of your organization. Right? So if your organization gets a reputation for having loose lips, I mean, people won't want to work there. Period. I mean, it gets out there, right? So even no matter how much money you can provide them, or whether it's because it's not all money, right? Some people work for us, a lot of people actually, based on philosophical and ideological reasons, right? They're in a despot type country, and they want to see it change. That does actually happen a lot. But either way, whether you're motivated by money or ideology, if you're not going to be around that long because either sloppy tradecraft or the need to get out there, and usually the boisterousness doesn't come obviously from intelligence professionals. It comes from political folks that want to take credit for it, right? I mean, we've seen that happen before where even it was great, and then all of a sudden it's like officials that know stuff want to say stuff. It's, why are you even talking about that? I mean, how about we just say the guy's dead and we just just go with that? I mean, it's usually, I don't think, done for vindictive reasons. It's just not really understanding the consequences as it's coming from a political entity and not necessarily the intelligence service. Intelligence service should never talk. They should just be willing to stay in the background, no parades, no public medals at least, or they have. You get my point. It's really not about that. It's about just being proud of what you did and keeping it to yourself. You owe it to the individual and you owe it to the organization long term, which is ultimately.
I have a question and a thought, kind of like, obviously Mossad knew where this guy was going, right? He lived in Qatar. They're not going to do it in Qatar, obviously, because like Qatar is like Switzerland of the Middle East. So for Mossad to be able to penetrate essentially the IRGC Secret Service, right, that protects VIPs, and for them to like burn that card, how deeply penetrated is the IRGC by Mossad or other Western intelligence agencies for them to just like, fuck it, we've been planning this and we'll blow our cover and that's that? They have to be, extremely like infiltrated.
I mean, yeah, I think that's totally true, D. I mean, it really does show that they had incredible access, placement, and the ability to task, right? And then they had to get weapon explosives in there enough to do what they did. So, and again, this is just what we see in the press and what's being reported about it.
I think one really interesting aspect of the, as this kind of falls together, someone should write a book about it. Oh wait, I'm supposed to be doing that. But kind of the relative as Mossad has emerged in the last few months. I mean, Mossad has, despite its reputation, as like any organization, has gone up and down and has had some catastrophic failures as well as some astonishing successes.
Well, October 7th was a catastrophic failure.
Well, that was really Shin Bet, at least. I mean, that's my point. Sure. That's a great point. But the contrast between the lead up to and Shin Bet's failures, and it's as though the country's regaining its status as an intelligence organization, which was I mean, as an intelligence focused country, and very sophisticated in both technological and human, and yet you had this enormous internal failure with Shin Bet. But Mossad is really, regardless of whether we think that the strategic outcome is going to be positive for Israel, Mossad is certainly performing some extraordinary feats here. Something that I would dare say, even with a couple of agency guys here, that our organizations may learn from. Although we can't do this sort of stuff, I understand that.
And D, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jason. No, go ahead, Jason.
I think too, going back to what you were just asking and saying, as far as the penetration, how deep it is, I think after this operation, there's going to be a hard reset within. So I don't think they need to. I'm not going to say they don't need to worry about it, but I think there's going to be a big purge, and so I think that once they get the answers, or while they're getting the answers that they want on how deep did this go, they're just going to get rid of everybody, however that is, and start all over.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Like, why do that if you can get this guy almost at any time outside of sending a message that like we can get you anywhere, anytime in the Blair house, essentially, where you're staying. And, it's nothing you could do about it. The fallout, though, is what kind of annoys me. It's because, like, when Israel pops off and gets everybody upset, we have to move carrier groups. We have to bring in 50 fighters to knock down missiles that are going to be shooting at it. Like, they know it's just, I don't know, it's kind of frustrating as an American because, like, I'm not exactly pro-Israel on this, specifically Netanyahu. I'm not a Netanyahu guy at all because I think he's doing this for political survival. It just goes so much more deep. And that's what I'm saying. As I'm not an intelligence guy, but I would think, like, if you have a adversary completely infiltrated, isn't it worth more in the long term rather than just burning that? I don't know.
I think someone in Israel, someone meaning some group of people, sat down and thought about that and said that it was worth, the juice was worth the squeeze in this case because of just what you said. Okay, yeah, we're going to piss some people off with this, and maybe we're popping off a little early, but we're also going to get probably another carrier group out of this. So we're also going to get political support from many in the U.S. And Western governments. So they were thinking that the juice was probably worth the squeeze in this case.
Yeah.
And it might also cause pause in Hamas itself. Some people are probably saying, whoa, hold on. I was supposed to go to Iran next month. Can you guys actually protect me? And also on the other side of that, there are some in Iran who are probably saying, do we really want to bring these people here? If we're going to get bombs dropped on us, it might get some of our people killed. So I think someone sat down and thought about all that internal strife that could be caused is worth the gain on the back end. And Mick, if I'm wrong, please let me know.
No, I don't think either of you guys are wrong. I think this is all part of the discussion, right? And the calculus going in here. So there's plenty of people, as you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu is not that popular in Israel, right? There's plenty of people, including I think President Biden's even mentioned this, that think he wants to extend the war because he realizes when the war's over, the far right part of his coalition is going to say we don't need you, right? Then he's got all sorts of legal issues he's got to go against. That's his political issues, right or wrong. That's what some people think. There's also a part of the IDF, even with its risks, that thinks this is inevitable. Like they think fighting Hezbollah is inevitable. Not that they want to; they've got enough on their shoulders, so to speak. But there's a lot of Israelis. It's like, look, we got 50,000 displaced Israelis sitting in hotels in Tel Aviv. They can't go back to their homes around the northern part of the northern border, right? So they think I don't think they want to see this war, but they think it's inevitable. So in some cases, you could say, why not just get this over with? And then, of course, there's this other factor, which hasn't got a lot of talk, is according to news reports, Iran's only like a week away from getting enough fissile material, so uranium enriched to a certain level where it can make a nuclear weapon, right? So there's a lot of bad stuff that could be happening. And from the U.S. perspective, yes, there's obviously an issue between the current U.S. administration and the current Israeli administration, but we are longtime security partners, country to country. So we are going to defend them. We're not going to let them fail. So that's an issue they know, right? So if we start thinking as they're thinking, they realize if this is inevitable and they're going to have to do something to mitigate a nuclear armed Iran, they know that we're going to be there. So again, I think all your points are valid, and this is something we've got to consider because we got to look at it from their perspective, whether it's Netanyahu's, from his political survival, or the country of Israel, including the security services and the IDF, thinking that a lot of this stuff is going to happen, and they might as well get it over with. Is one way to put it.
Yeah, there's definitely it's definitely part of a plan intended to bring things to a head. And you look across the board. You've got this assassination of one of the chief negotiators. After a period where Israelis have been, I'm just making a comment. I mean, the negotiations, frankly, have been a huge humiliation for the Israelis, and seeing someone with the power of life and death, 200 or so innocent people and kind of milking it out. That's the perception the Israelis have of this guy. So there was a revenge quotient in this for sure, and a way to appeal to that very kind of basic instinct. But of course, the families of the hostages are not happy because they see Netanyahu cutting yet another kind of lifeline to getting any survivors out of there.
Right.
But at the same time, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to point out, Andy, one of the aspects of the intelligence services has really come to light in this. I mean, it's always been there. There's always been this kind of cloakroom diplomacy, right? So if it's sensitive and you wouldn't really want your Secretary of State out there meeting with people like Hamas, right, or any terrorist organization or unsavory characters, oftentimes you use not just a CI director, that's actually unusual, but other people down the ranks, right, that do this sensitive diplomacy. And it's always been there, but this is really highlighted. And in some ways, even though it does work pretty effectively, it hasn't worked that well here, not for lack of effort, but this is going to set that back, because a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute. So the whole time they've been negotiating, it's been all the intelligence services, then the other guy's negotiator gets schwacked. Like, I don't think it was. I certainly don't think it was from our side. But people could step back and say this whole thing was suspect, right? When you got the chief of Mossad looking across the table, at the same time he's trying to negotiate, at the same time he knows what's going to happen, and this whole thing is planned, right? So,
and now an interesting development: the head of Mossad, Shin Bet and Mossad chiefs have apparently landed in Egypt today for talks on hostage release. And so that's unusual in that previously Netanyahu had sent lower level guys from both organizations, but now you've got both chiefs landing in Egypt, all right, to continue negotiations, which suggests that, I don't know what it suggests. I don't know, but it's yet another piece of the puzzle, right? Why would they do that? Yes. Why would they send their most important guys to Egypt to meet with the head Egyptian, the intelligence chief, Abbas Kamal there, who, of course, I wouldn't say they're friends, but they know him. They've worked with him very closely. Right. So
work all the time.
Something's going on here.
So there is a line of thought, and this could go straight to your point, bringing that up, that Hania was the problem. Yeah. He's obviously not under direct threat. I guess he was actually, but he didn't think so. Whereas the Hamas commanders in Gaza, when they got pressure, that's when they started saying, okay, maybe we don't need a permanent ceasefire to get this up. Okay, you could see the shift where at first it was Hamas that was the problem, and then Israel started moving the goalpost. There is a belief that Hania was what kept holding up an actual ceasefire. Ultimately, he's sitting in Qatar, Doha, in a fancy pants 5-star hotel. He ain't under the same pressure. At least he didn't think he was. So that could be to your, if they're down there and this actually starts moving forward, then the people that thought that, I think, would have some validity.
Very interesting. A very interesting take, right? Despite all of our talk about, hey, this was intended to push this to a crescendo, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was intended to aid negotiations. And if that is the Israeli government's claim, then sending two of their two intelligence chiefs to Egypt in the immediate aftermath of the assassination does kind of, it's meant at least, I think, to get that perception. It's because they could have kept that visit absolutely secret. I mean, they could have. They know how to do that. So the fact that the press knows about that visit, again, is all part of this. I mean, it's interesting. Jack will not appreciate this as an investigative journalist, but a lot of times investigative journalists are following in trace of government breadcrumbs, right? Not here in the States. I'm not sure we're that smart.
Please. That's what the New York Times does.
We're too much of a democracy. I mean, democracy is messy. We can't make all these things happen, and thank goodness we can't. But it's really, it's another layer. Listen, Mick, I know we've only got you for another 21 minutes and 10 seconds. Not that I'm, not that I'm counting every second with you as such value, but of course I do. So what do you want to talk about? What else do you have going on in your life?
So, I mean, we've been working on the Humanitarian Corridor with humanitarian aid into Gaza, and obviously the decision was made to pull the J-lots.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
Sure.
because not we all, but I, for one, kind of grew up since, 2010, 2011 in the planning community, thinking the logisticians had it. I mean, this J-lots thing was awesome, and doesn't, it seems as though there may be some issues with the
Well,
concept.
yes.
How robust it.
Yes, and what I could start with, it was an incredible effort on the part of Central Command, particularly the Army component. It was, I mean, you could just look at the manual and see that it was going to be a challenge. The JLOPS does work in relatively calm seas or a lake, and that's not what they got, right? The Eastern Mediterranean this time of year was not those things, and most of the time it was above the capacity of it to withstand. So the criticism to use it, I think, it's fair one way or the other. But I can say it brought in a lot of food. Even the short time it was up, it brought in a lot of food into Gaza that was desperately needed by the people of Gaza that wouldn't have gotten it. And at the end of the day, we were proud to be our small part to support it. It was actually got to more people without being looted than other parts of Gaza.
So it filled a critical need at a critical time.
Yeah, and I would like to see it continue. Right, our Sam Mundy and I lead the group that kind of came up with a plan. We came up with a plan that didn't require the JLOTs, right? So we'd like to see it go back to that, where it would be a port facility, temporary, because it needs to meet the standards of the Israelis, that could withstand every sea state in the Eastern Mediterranean, right? So it would have to be moved.
Yeah,
it would be temporary. And we'd like to see that, but that's not up to us. Obviously, it would already be happening. But the U.S. government, royally, built the beach landing zone, the aid delivery zone. It's already there, right? The Cypriot government and everybody set up the system in Cyprus. That's already there, with the screeners and all that stuff that had to go into play. And now there's no maritime. So hopefully, the powers that be decide it needs to happen. When it's not us, fine. It needs to be somebody else. That doesn't mean they shouldn't have the ground corridors opened up. They should be opened up. But let's face it, the desperate problem there needs to have every available means to get food, clean water, medicine in there. And eventually, when this war is over, how are they going to do reconstruction when 80% of the buildings have been significantly damaged to the point of you can't live in them without access to the sea? Or you can see how many problems there are just bringing 40, 50 trucks in a day. How are you going to move that much rubble out and that much stuff in? So this is a much bigger issue that I think once this war is over, the international community needs to grasp. But we're still working there. We're doing what we can inside, working with the UN, working with the NGOs that we've been supporting the entire time. And obviously, we're looking forward to continuing.
Think about this, and all, great points, Mick. It's very easy, of course, to, jump on as almost every newspaper did and not attack, but just kind of ridicule the JLOTS effort. But, if a historical reminder, remember the Mulberry Harbor was smashed up in the immediate aftermath of the D-Day landings by not a higher sea state than expected. It's something they thought they prepared for, but it was decimated, and they put it together again and learned from it and built up an enormously robust over-the-shore logistics system based on the lessons. So, we forget, I'm pounding kind of the jingoistic drum here, that, one of our greatest strengths as Americans is our ability to innovate.
I got a question.
And learn from what has happened. And that's really the question going ahead. Isn't so much. What happened? Why? Blah, blah, is what do we do now? How do we develop it? How do we learn from the lessons? And you're right. Very quickly, I mean, you mentioned 50 trucks. I mean, think about it. 150 trucks was kind of sustainment level throughout this crisis. But as you point out, when you get to reconstruction, it's going to be many times that. You're going to absolutely need over the shore the ability to deliver material over the shore. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
So for the permanent pier, what's holding it back? Like, what's the rub really? Money, or is it like political will? Like,
there's funding. Thanks to the international community, there's funding. It's approval by Israel, and it's the agreement by the United Nations and the NGOs to keep using the system. So part of it's like a chicken and egg thing, to be fair. It's like, well, why am I going to send my stuff to Cyprus if there's no maritime corridor?
yeah.
And then the Israelis like, well, if there's no maritime corridor, what am I approving? So, and obviously a little bitty advisory group like us can't make this happen. We're happy to talk to anybody, but it's going to have to take, leadership, the UN, leadership by the United States and the EU, right? Because the Amalthea plan coming out of Cyprus is really an EU thing. It's a Cypriot-led thing, but it's an EU thing. So we're just going to keep doing what we're doing inside and helping as many people as we can until hopefully that gets resolved. And we can start right now, and the funding's already there. So we can. It's a temporary facility, and I don't want to get too nerdy on you, but essentially,
get as nerdy as you like. That's
so
70% of our audience.
Oh, okay, cool. We dredge out a slot that a barge can come straight into the beach, and it's a nest, so it's secured. And then there's a sea break, if you will, a temporary one that depletes the wave issues, right? And then there's a platform with a crane on it that can take containers off and put it straight on the trucks. So you avoid put on a floating pier, and then it has to be put on smaller craft to bring it into the causeway, and then down the causeway to the Trident Pier, and then it's on. That was the J-Lots. Ours, it just barge comes straight to the beach. And the group that we've been working with, the engineering group, the shippers, and the logistics, they've already done these. So it isn't we can show that it works. So it's not
theoretical.
Not a surprise. It's not theoretical.
So why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that instead of the J-Lot?
Don't know. We came up with this plan that's referred to as the Blue Beach plan, basically because the first beach we looked at was the Blue Beach, and then we had to move it, but we couldn't change the name because everybody, knew it as Blue Beach. But
you got to have a blue beach. There's got to be a blue beach and a red beach. Otherwise, it's it's a worthless Bob.
Right. In December of 23, so this is way before the J-Lots, but that is what it is. What I would say to those that, I get the criticism of the J-Lots, but the criticism of the United States is, everybody else is talking about, what a crisis it is. What do you do something about it? Yada, yada, yada. We heard it all. And all of a sudden it was only the U.S. that pushed a pier from Virginia to Gaza. Yeah. So, I get the criticism, but it's like, hey man, it's not the critic that counts. It's the, as Teddy would say, it's the man in the arena. At least these servicemen and women were in the arena, and a lot of other people were just holding, big fancy conferences about what should be done.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with that sentiment, Mick. It's that's kind of a sub motto of our podcast here, right? If we could figure out how to make it in one sentence, without sounding so cliched. And also, the fact is, and this is a reminder, I think, for the US, and as we come to an election, and regardless of which party wins, and we start looking at, there's a very alluring thought that has taken hold, perhaps both sides of the aisle, that we can kind of retreat into ourselves and stop, helping the world and just focus on, our Appalachian problems or whatever it may be. But the fact is that we depend on, we depend for our standing and our WASTA and the things that we want to do because we have that obligation. And in the aftermath of 7 October, the phone didn't ring in Moscow or in Beijing, it was everyone looked to the United States for leadership and was highly critical when, the perceptions were that the United States had dropped the ball, but no other country was there, and no other country was willing to do this, and so I'm with you, Mick. I mean, I'm a logical patriot in that sense.
I just want to give you guys a heads up. They usually call me about 10 till.
Tell Stephanopoulos to wait, bro.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well,
One
Another
last,
Greek American.
yeah, one last thing I want to ask about. This is a little bit out of left field. Is the whole deal with KSM that was now rescinded?
I was gonna ask that.
I mean, that's crazy. I'm a New Yorker, right? Like, the guy planned 9/11. I'm gonna be a little crass with this. The last 20 years, we've smoked a lot of people. Let's just let him out and put a couple slugs in the back of his head and let him go. No deals, no Guantanamo, no lawyers. Like,
hey,
let's just.
Do we have an editorial policy?
That's my editorial. That's my opinion on that. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was wild.
Well, it got rescinded.
I know. Thank you.
Got rescinded.
Yeah.
Secretary also rescinded that. I think, chances are, I don't know. The lawyers are working this deal. Apparently, weren't informed their chain of command, right? Because there's like 0% chance they're going to say, you can cop a plea. You killed 3,000 Americans, and we're going to take the death penalty off the table. Like, I imagine that thing went onto his desk, shredded, thrown back out of his door. I guess.
But the fact that it
didn't even know
it
about
hit
it.
media, it hit the media before it. I mean, it just kind of looks a little bit like a
Yes. That was, I don't think that maybe the lawyers tried to leak it because they thought maybe it would put them in a position where they couldn't.
I mean,
Lloyd was like, nope.
Who knows? Maybe we can get General Austin on Eyes On.
Sure, we could try. Mick, help us out.
Talk about this and Afghanistan and other minor issues.
He went under surgery and didn't tell anybody. Why can't he hop on here?
That's right.
You're right. Yeah.
I know his personal assistant, one of his personal assistants, and he swears he wrote a sticky and put it on check that store. But it's just, how it is.
Hey, man's got 45, 50, almost 50 years of service. So you got to keep it on.
That's right. Honestly, I thought that was a huge deal about nothing. I mean, we're all about not the person, but continuity. So anyway, all right. Mick, over to you for wrap-up comments before you go on to your lesser station. What is it, ABC?
Yes. Yeah. Analyst.
Okay. Well, you're gonna take a giant jump down in circulation. So while you had this massive audience, the floor is yours.
Well, it's great talking to you guys again. As always, I'm departing here and heading into Israel as soon as they let the planes fly. All right. And then we'll be there for a while doing what we're doing. Look forward to talking to you guys again.
Excellent.
Hopefully on the other side of Armageddon, or not Armageddon, right?
Be safe over there.
Cool.
Thanks, Mick. Guys, don't forget to check out. Don't forget to check out the Lobo Institute. The links will be in the description. Andy Milburn, his Substack, his book, everything will be in the description. Patreon.com/teamhouse. Keep our lights on. Mick is not cheap, so
no, he's not.
Help us out.
He's worth every penny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.